Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. It has been just a wild start to the school year. We've had events all over the world connecting with some amazing scientists, adventurers, conservationists from around the world. And we're going to take a really special trip today. So classrooms who have followed along with us the last few years know that we have done many events in different places around the world, especially in the northern reaches of our planet, with the team from Hearts in the Ice. So that is Hilde and Sunniva. They are two seasoned polar ambassadors and citizen scientists. So Hearts in the Ice was created in 2018 as a global platform for education, social engagement, connecting students, scientists, manufacturers, environmental organizations, and all of those who care about the health of our planet. So connecting everybody in this big conversation around climate change and ways that we can all be part of the solution. So from September 2019 to May 2021, they spent a total of 19 months living in a remote trapper's cabin called Bumsaboo in Svalbard. So this was 140 kilometers from their closest neighbor. And along the way, we connected. We brought scientists virtually to join them, and we connected multiple times, sometimes several times a month, for these amazing live events. And so for classrooms who are new to Hearts in the Ice and what they're up to, we have an incredible sizzle reel that I want to share to give you a little taste of what it was like, their time spent at Bumsaboo, before we actually bring Hilde and Sunniva in with some special guests to join us today. So just bear with me for one moment here while I do my screen share. There we go. And let's check out this video together.
So the question is, what did we give up? What did we forfeit to come here?
What didn't we give up? Our whole life.
We gave up our jobs, shopping, showers,
Our family and friends.
Hey, this is us. Hi. And we don't ever go anywhere without Etra, our four-legged friend. Here's to making it up as we go.
Da var vi inne i mørketida med bjørn rundt veggene, Sunniva.
So today is March 9th, and it's the first time that I see the sun since October. Oh, I have to open up the window. Look at this. There it is.
We're out here on a lunch break.
All right, so a little taste of 2 years in the high Arctic. We connected with Hilde and Sunniva in many places around the world since then. I don't think I'll hit all of them. Iceland, Scotland, Norway, in British Columbia, so different places around the world. And so we thought, why not? Let's add one more place to the list as they're visiting Cambridge Bay in Nunavut here in Canada. So I'm going to bring them in live here right now. Hi, Hilde. Hey, Sunniva. How we doing?
Hey, Joe. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see all of you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And amazing. You have some guests joining us today. Why don't you introduce the two of them just briefly before we chat for a bit?
Okay, I'll introduce this handsome man right here. This is George. He is one of the elders in the community, and we had the great fortune to meet him yesterday for the first time and spent an hour with him. And it was, I have to say, just for Hilde and I, it was really fairly emotional because there's just a long history of just inconsistencies in how people are treated up in the north, and there's so much wisdom from people like George that really need to be passed on and preserved. So we really wanted to introduce him to rest of the communities that are joining the call today. So George, thank you very much for being here.
Not a problem.
Yeah, and Hilde, you want to?
Yeah, Ipeelie, he's the local, or he's actually a movie star from the north, and he's both a filmmaker and also what do you call that? A movie star, and he's going to tell you a little bit about his daily life up here. So we really look forward to that.
All right, perfect. Well, I think the best spot to start would be a little bit about what you're up to. Why are you in Cambridge Bay? What's been going on?
Yes, so usually we are connected from the Norwegian Arctic up in Svalbard, Joe, and this is a fantastic way to explore more of the Arctic and see how we can be relevant maybe in the Canadian Arctic. So being here in Cambridge Bay feels like home, more or less. We are stuck here for another day. I would say, fortunately, due to the weather. It's a snowstorm outside, but it really feels like home. It feels like our backyard up in Svalbard. It's a lot of weather now. It's a severe storm outside, and the terrain is more or less the same. It's no trees. It's not that close to the North Pole as we are used to be, but it's colder here and even more remote actually than it is up in Svalbard. So it's great being here, and we are looking forward to explore more of this opportunity for Hearts in the Ice to maybe stay a winter here, the next winter.
So we've been traveling around quite a bit since we left that lovely cabin Bumpsaboo a year ago, and we're really trying to drive the conversation forward and make some impact. And as we're on my home soil of Canada, one of the things Hilde and I talked about when we were at Bumpsaboo, immersed in that environment with the wildlife and the wild weather, there's a lot happening in the Canadian North. And we call ourselves citizen scientists, which is a word that it's a very Western word. But the true community scientists are people like Ipeelie and George sitting next to us. And one of, just to add on to what Hilde shared, one of the reasons we're here is to see if we can take Hearts in the Ice, which is a global platform for dialogue, education, and inspiration and action around climate change. Could we create a pilot project here in this community that works with some of the community members, where we can provide some training and funding to a handful of people in the community, and use them as the experts, because we're sitting right next to what we consider and what the community here considers an expert in knowledge around what's happening with the climate. And so we would like to give voice and greater elevation to the wisdom that lies with the locals, because they live with and for the land and have for decades. So it's a humbling experience to be here. And, without further ado, maybe we can sort of move on, because I'd like to give space to both George and Ipeelie to share. So thanks to everybody for joining, and Joe for hosting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the citizen science, because it is so important that everybody's playing a role. You don't have to be classically trained to do something important. And I'll share a few links shortly where students can check out some of the citizen science that you took part in over those 2 years in Bumsaboo, and how you helped so many organizations around the world, from Scripps Ocean to NASA. So very, very cool. Well, I think the best spot to start is to meet our speakers a little more in depth. So George, I would love it, George, if you could talk a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself to the students.
Okay, good morning. My name is George Nakimayuq, and this is a place where I live, where I grew. And the changes that I've witnessed as I grew are incredible. Today, compared to the early days in my childhood days, are two different worlds. And that's because of climate change. In the early days, I was born on the land. My family lived alone. We were nomadic, and we moved where we could survive, where we needed to be to survive, and that meaning that where we could harvest food to eat. We need food to eat, so we would move with the seasons. So being on the land, caribou skin tent in the summertime, that's what I lived in. And then in the winter time, we were nomadic. We didn't have any modern equipment. There was absolutely nothing modern that was bought from any stores or given to us from anybody. All our tools, our clothing were all traditionally made. Everything was handcrafted. Our tools were handcrafted. We don't have no trees, so anything that we needed that would include, for a lance example, we'd pick up driftwood on the shore and craft that into what we need as tools. And then in the wintertime, we lived in igloos. Our igloos, we can't have heat in them, and our only source of heat at the time is a soapstone lamp. It gave very little heat, but it was enough to keep our igloos. So when it froze in the wintertime, in the fall time, we would have 0 degrees starting in September, and we would not feel anything above room temperature, like +1. In our igloo, our mean temperature, our mean high temperature in igloo with a lamp was probably -3, -5, in that range. While outside it would be -40 and -50. So that's how I grew up. That's how we lived. We moved around on the ocean, and every community is different. Our family group survived with seals, caribou, and fish, and that was mainly available. So when the seasons changed, we moved, and I witnessed the birth of my siblings in an igloo with no nurses, just traditional births, and it's all incredible. It's home, and I've tried different places. Summertime, you can't do anything about the heat, like +30, I suffer in that. But in the cold, I don't mind the cold. The cold is home. I can dress. If it gets colder, I can throw an extra layer on. But in the summertime, when it's so hot, it's really hard to handle that heat. Now, in the early days, our temperature would average 2 degrees, 5 degrees in the summertime. A really hot day in the summertime back then would be 8 degrees. centigrade, maybe 10 at the most. And today, the same place, we're hitting 30 degrees at times. So it is just incredible. And that kind of change in temperatures bring a lot of changes. Like the climate is bringing up things that were dormant in the ground, frozen in the ground, and a permafrost melting brings a lot of things up from the permafrost. So we have problems with that arise out of climate change, and it's continuing, and it's going to do so. And we're trying to adapt to it, and I think we're doing a pretty good job in adapting and learning as we go along. I'm not sure what else to add.
Yeah,
Thank you.
George, I mean, I love what you said there. That the cold is home, and you're seeing these changes happening. And I'm so glad that you're able to share your stories, with this generation, with those who aren't experiencing the change as dramatically as you are in the Arctic. So it's really great to have your voice joining us today and sharing some of those stories, some of your experiences.
Yep. Right.
And then, Ipeelie, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and, share a little bit of what it was like maybe growing up in the North and how you came to be in the industry, in the kind of the entertainment industry.
Okay, sounds good. Good morning. My name is Ipeelie Ootoova, originally from Pond Inlet, but I've been in Cambridge Bay for the past 8 years. I was adopted to elders, my great grandmother's sister, and since we lived out on the land quite a bit with them before they passed on, and so I got to experience a little bit from them and from my father going out hunting, seal hunting, and caught my first seal when I was 4 years old. But moving forward, when I was 17 years old, I was asked to be in this film that was going to be filmed in Pond Inlet, and me and my best friend went to go meet up with the director, and we just talked about ourselves and our experience in Pond Inlet, playing sports and hunting and whatnot. And I totally forgot about the film, and I went on to a basketball tournament in Iqaluit. And when I came back, before I traveled to Iqaluit, I had a little bit, my hair was a little bit longer, and before I traveled, I cut my hair, and the reason why they wanted to cast me because I had a little bit of long hair then, and my first director was really upset about it. But that's how my acting career started in 2009, and then I've done more features and TV shows and short films, and starting to produce and direct and write my own short films. And my latest film we filmed in April. I wrote and directed and produced it, and it is being edited right now in Greenland. So my friend in Greenland is editing it, and I just want to show the landscape and the animals up north, and just the history of Inuit, and just because it's like we don't hear much about it from I prefer to just let other people in the world see what we experience, what we go through up north, and so yeah, that's how my acting career started, and starting to produce my own projects now.
Yeah, and that's such a great form of storytelling, to be able to share stories through that medium and have them reach so much further through film. Really be able to kind of share your stories with the world now. So that must be a really, really exciting experience. You must have a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I always mention that watching a film, it's just like a conversation starter. After you watch a film, you talk to people what their thoughts are, and if I watch a movie from say from somewhere like Mongolia, I never really knew about it until I watched the film and started talking about our similarities between the two. I always tell that it's a conversation starter, and that's what I like about film industry. You get to meet people from I've traveled to London, England for one of the TV shows, and I've told a lot of people about what it's like up here. We're filming in a studio and we're wearing caribou skin outfits and whatnot, but it was very different from filming in the studio and actually being up here. So that's what I enjoy about the film industry. You get to teach people that are very interested in up north.
Okay. Well, I think what we should do now is continue the conversation. I might mix in a few more questions. I think we should bring in some students who are joining us on camera. We also have some classrooms that are joining us via YouTube. I think we should mix in some of their questions. And I think, anything's fair game, from what it's like living somewhere like Cambridge Bay to questions for Hilde and Sunniva about their time in Svalbard. So if you are tuning in via YouTube, use that chat sidebar. Let us know where you're viewing from and send in a few questions. And let's bring in our first classroom and see if they have a question for us. So I'm going to go to Alberta. We have some 7th graders hanging out with us. Let me bring them into the call here. Here we go. Hey, 7th graders, how we doing?
Hi.
Hey, everyone. All right. We would love to grab a question if you have a question for our crew today.
Who has a question? Okay, Gareth.
What was the coldest day you've ever experienced?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, the coldest day that you've ever experienced.
No. George, that's for you.
Wow, that's probably be around -80. I would imagine.
-80, he said.
And
George
that would
said.
be in February. February being our coldest time of year.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know you said the cold is home. It must just feel like such a difference when you go from the igloo where it's like -3, -5, and then you go outside. It must feel really warm coming back into the igloo compared to what it's like outside.
Oh yes, it's a big change.
Yeah.
You have to be dressed to go outside, in -40, -50, and we were dressed really well. I mean, our people survived with the best gear for clothing, and that being caribou. Caribou being warm, one of the warmest for dressing.
Warmer than sealskin.
Warmer, much warmer than sealskin.
Wow.
Yep. They have hollow hair in them, and that nothing warmer that I know of, even in today's modern society, that can compare to the warmth of caribou.
Warmer than polar bear too. That
Warmer.
is. Yeah.
Oh yes, much warmer. Yeah.
Amazing. All right. I see a couple more hands, so let's grab another question from our crew in Alberta.
Okay, Carter.
How many inches of snow would you regularly get during the winter?
Did you hear that?
Okay. So they're wondering about snow. What's kind of the depth of snow that you will generally see in the winter?
On a flat surfaces, if you could see outside what we're looking at today, the snow is blown around all the time from the winds. And what creates deep snow are obstacles like hills or rocks or valleys. And those can get very deep, but on the open flats, there's very little snow to speak of all winter because it's blown around all the time. So it will gather. If we get a north wind on the southern slopes of the hills and rocks, we get some really deep snow. But not on the flats. The wind blows it all the time. And the snow, compared to other places, in a tree line, I know the snow is really soft. But where it's blown all the time, the snow will be like cement almost. It'll be really, really hard surface. So different types of snow created from the weather.
All right. I am going to tuck our Alberta class backstage, but we will come back and grab another couple questions. Now we're going to head somewhere where snow might be a little more unfamiliar. We have a great group of students who are joining us from Mexico today. So let me bring them into the call. How are we doing, boys and girls? Some 7th graders hanging out with us in Mexico.
Joe, I'm almost tempted to take them outside. Maybe if really quickly to show them what it's like outside.
Yeah, if
No,
you think
just
the signal will hold, let's do it.
we'll just show them the outside door. Ipeelie, could you open just really quickly?
Yeah.
And then we'll come right back to this table.
Here, let me make it full screen so we can see what we're seeing here.
Can you see Ipeelie?
Yep. Oh, it looks windy. Oh, we hear the wind too.
Let's go.
Whew, I'm glad you're nice and warm and joining us today.
Had to.
Oh, let me bring up our group there. Our group in Mexico is showing outside. Do you want to show again? There, they got nice.
Oh, okay.
Looks like some palm trees. Sunny.
Wow. What's the weather like? What's the temperature?
If you want to unmute for us, grade 7s, what's the temperature today?
It's really, really hot. We're normally at 30 degrees, 35 degrees Celsius average. So it's really hot compared to you.
All right, awesome. Well, do you guys have a question for George or Ipeelie? We'd love to grab a couple questions.
If you have an emergency, what do you do?
Lalo asks, if you have an emergency there in the Arctic or when you're away, what do you do? Because you're alone, what do you do?
Yeah, great question.
That's a great question. There's so many different scenarios that I could speak on that. Probably I could go back to one of my days when I was alone, and I had a breakdown. My snowmobile broke down when I was about 40 miles out of town. And, you know, the thing about something like that when you're alone is not to panic, you know, just to sit down and go over in your head what you have to deal with. And you have to remain calm, keep your wits about you. And when people get in trouble is when they overreact, when they get, you know, excited. They think that the world is going to end at the time. But it's so many different scenarios that I could think back on the times that I got in trouble on the land. And every time it comes back to what my grandfather said, that you sit down, assess your situation, and work with what you have. That's all you can do.
Can I add a small thing, Joe? Is because when we were at Bumsaboo, we used this satellite phone, and now today we're connecting via internet and Wi-Fi, but you didn't have
No
communication.
Nothing. No communication. There was no navigation systems. No modern equipment. You know, when we were on the land with my family, everything we had was just traditional, like travel, navigation.
The sun.
Yeah, everything was just
The
natural terrain.
All right. Wow. And George, I imagine just in what must seem like a short period of time, how much technology has changed from when you were growing up to, you know, being able to talk to a classroom in Mexico and see the palm trees and how sunny it is live.
Yes, you can keep that heat. Yes, I enjoy what I'm in today.
All right. Yeah, 7th graders, do you have another question for us?
All right. Santiago is asking, at there, normally, what do you eat? Do we have your pizza or what do you eat every day?
When you grow up.
The question is about now or in the early days?
Let's go both. Yeah.
Okay. So what we ate in the early days was what we harvested. I'll just give an example. In fall time, we can harvest the char when they are going upstream. So we'll harvest those in the river. And the way that we eat those, because we don't have modern day things like the stove or an oven or anything like that, and having none of that in the early days, a lot of our food was consumed raw or frozen. There was very little food that was cooked because we didn't have things like the Coleman stove or things that we have today. Um, so yeah, what we ate was raw or frozen, and everything we ate, a lot of times it was an acquired taste. So some of our food, because we have no freezers in the summertime, I'm speaking now, is the food will ferment. So we eat a lot of it in my young day, fermented food, which today, a lot of the people can't even stand the smell because it does smell very strong. And to taste it, the taste will be in your mouth for a few days. But that's what we survived on. We had nothing else. If we didn't eat that fermented food, we didn't survive. As simple as that. So today, we have pizzas, we have steaks, we have basically everything that you can get anywhere in town. Maybe not as good, but when we're on the land today, we go back to our traditional lifestyle because we won't have the oven or cooking utensils out there. So we'll eat a lot of our food raw or frozen.
Ipeelie, what about you?
I grew up pretty much eating everything like from animals and like modern food, and I just to add on to that, like we can't really grow anything up here, so everything that the fresh stuff are flown in by plane because we're so isolated, and then in the summertime the ship comes in with non-perishable food, and so a lot of our stuff are flown in or by ship, and like I grew up eating like I said before, I was adopted to elders, and they mostly ate what we caught on the land, and like even still today, I work full time. We're at my workplace, but whenever I can, I still go out hunting and catch animals that give out to elders and family and that can't go out anymore.
Maybe we should add, Joel, that even up in Svalbard, where there are modern societies, Sunniva and I lived at this hut for 19 months. We also lived off the land a little bit. We hunted a reindeer and also a lot of fish. So that was very local and traditional in many ways, even though we had supplements during the winter that was from the modern world, of course, and had our provision for the whole stay.
And we also relied on ships, cargo ships that came in that could come in close enough to Bumsaboo, and we could go out to meet them with the non-perishables, and that was always a real treat.
Yeah.
2 times.
Yeah. Well, we have a group of 7th graders in Pennsylvania joining us, and they would like to know, Hilde and Sunniva, what led the two of you to such a passion for the polar regions and the work you're doing now?
Well, I've been living up in the Arctic for 27 years already. I've seen a lot of changes in the Arctic, especially the 15, 20 years now. The average temperature during winter has risen with 10 degrees since I came there in 95. And then I met Sunniva in 2016, and she had the same experience from the Antarctic area. So we really wanted to try to tell the story around what is happening up in the Arctic and be at service for scientists as citizen scientists and communicate it with scientists that really knows what's going on in a language, in a way that we all understand. So protect what we love.
I grew up with Norwegian parents, and my father was a captain on an oil tanker, and he always went to sea, and I wondered where he went. And I was, had a job as a computer programmer, believe it or not, in Norway in my 20s. And I quit that job to take a 4-month mountaineering course because I wanted to see if I was capable of sort of going out into the wilderness and being self-sufficient, having the skills. And then fast forward, I'm 30 years old, and I was invited to be part of the first team of women that skied to the South Pole, which I did, and we saw nothing because there's nothing in the interior of the Antarctic. And I really wanted to go back to Antarctica and see the wildlife and the ice and experience it. And I did. I was invited to be a guest on a ship. And then the years passed, and when you go to the Arctic or the Antarctic, it's not a place that you check off your list. It's not a place that you just take the photos and you're done. It crawls under your skin. They're very remote regions in our world, and they shine a light on every other place on the planet, and it's really, really special. So when we met, as Hilde shared 6 years ago, actually, it was like a passion that a lot of people possess when they experience the polar regions. It's so extreme and so harsh, and it's experience that you hope everybody has. But if we don't stand up and try to protect these places, then there will be a time when people can't experience these places. So we're taking our passion and turning it into action, so to speak. So you could call us soul sisters in the polar regions.
All right. Well, I see another classroom. I think it's another classroom in Alberta, 7L, that joined us behind the scenes. So if you do have a question for us, just turn your camera on so I know that we should come and visit your group. But before we do, Ipeelie, George talked a little bit about, some of the changes he's seen over time. And I'm wondering if you're seeing some changes too, if you're seeing some changes and maybe if they're happening a little bit quicker.
Yeah, like I said before, I grew up in Pond Inlet, and the hunting and the hunting and the landscape is very different comparing the two. But having been here for 8 years, I've noticed like some areas where I usually go hunting seals throughout the year. We hunt like some areas there's seems to be a lot of seals, in some areas where there's not much. And this year I haven't gone out much because I was in Pond Inlet visiting my family and whatnot. But hunting seals, that was one of the main animals that I hunt. And I don't know, I can't really say much about it because I have been only here for 8 years. But I noticed that from my experience anyway, it's that the seals move a lot, and they don't just stay in one spot. They move to different areas where they gather their food and whatnot. And this year I didn't really get to go out much, and I went out and gone boating on Monday, and I got a ring seal and a bearded seal. And the bearded seal that I caught was either left by its mother early or the mother was shot. So the body there's no fat in it, and the flippers were big like an adult, but the body was short and no fat in it. But that's my experience here so far.
Yeah. And before we bring up the class from Mexico again with another question, I'm curious about oh, sorry, my screen just paused here. There we go. So I'm curious about, we see that things have changed in the community, from eating more traditional foods that you could hunt to things being brought in, like George, you mentioned pizza and steak. So I'm wondering, being in a community in the north, a community that's a bit isolated, what are some of the needs that the community has up in somewhere like Cambridge Bay? What are some of the needs, whether it's food security or mental health? Are there needs up there in the community that maybe aren't being met?
Yes, George. The one thing that I really noticed up here, that we really need, we have a large shortage of, is dwelling places, housing units. The community is growing, families are growing, and the housing here, they have a really long waiting list of people that apply for a house to live in, and some of them wait for years, 5 years, 7 years, some of them. So that's a real major shortage of here is the living units, the houses, housing.
Does that cause people to leave Cambridge Bay?
Some, yeah, with some, because they have no place to stay. A lot of the houses are there's too many people in the house. Like you get a family of 8 or 10 people in one family in a 2-bedroom unit. That's too small.
Too stressful.
Yeah. So there's a real major shortage of housing up here. And I believe it's in every community.
Yeah, especially when everything has to come, by ship. Yeah, and you mentioned the source of wood, the driftwood that you use to make some tools. It's handy for that, but definitely not enough to build full structures like that. Yeah. So let's bring in our class in Mexico one more time and see if they have one more question for us. There they are.
Right, Sandy, come here.
In the Arctic, what do you do for fun?
What do you do for fun?
What do you do for fun?
I go out on land, and that's my fun. I enjoy the land. I used to work until I hit 60, and I retired, and now all I do every day when the weather permits is to be out on land. And a lot of it is not trying to harvest something. A lot of my time is spent, taking inventory of my backyard. My backyard is huge. And I work with the community. We keep an eye out on what's available, what animals are available, what they're doing, and things like that. So that's what I do now. I will harvest animals when we need to. I'll get a caribou, I'll get a seal, any of the traditional food that we eat, not just for myself, but also for my family members and the elders that can't get out anymore in the community.
What about you, Ipeelie?
For me, I like I said before, I work full time, but when I'm not working, I play sports and go out hunting as much as I can and spend time with family. I have a 3-year-old son, and we spend a lot of time with him and travel. Like I travel quite a bit. I've gone to a lot of places. Like I've been to Panama, I've been to Hawaii, and like I've like to experience and meet indigenous people all over the world. And my filmmaking, photography, and those are the kind of things that I like to do.
Awesome. And I think, as we're getting closer to wrapping up for today, we'll have students joining us from different countries like Canada, the United States, Mexico. And even in Canada, we're so separate. It's such a distance to the far north, to the territory. So I'm wondering, for students who just see little clips in the media, who don't really have an idea of what it's like in the north, what's happening in the north. I'm wondering, is there a message or something you would like to say to students who might be tuning in to this event? Something you want to tell them about life in the north? That's a tough question.
Well, I'm not from the north, but do you mind if I share something you said yesterday? The wisdom of our world exists not in a computer. It exists in those ancestors and the indigenous who have listened to sort of the wisdom of our natural world and have harvested based on their innate experience with the natural world, not looking at an app, so to speak. And so I think what I feel and what we heard from George yesterday is we're losing that indigenous wisdom and that knowledge. And when it's gone, unless it's recorded and unless we are learning from it. So whether people are living in South America or, in the North, there is wisdom, indigenous wisdom around the world. Apparently there are 7,000 different voices out there, with indigenous languages. And I think it's for all of us, regardless of our age, it's so important for us to reach out to those who are older than we are or who possess that knowledge so that we can understand how important it is to preserve and cultivate that and find a new way of living with our natural world, because we've been taking from our natural world and she can't handle it anymore. And that's why we're seeing severe climate change. And so I think the real way forward is to understand what it was like back when you were growing up, George.
Yeah, I might just add to that too, that in the early days, compared to today, I'll use myself as an example. Traveling on land, you need a lot of skill, you need a lot of know-how and understanding. If you're going to travel, 100 miles, 200 miles without navigational equipment, your navigation is traditional. I use that traditional. I grew up using traditional navigation that I learned from my father and my grandfather. And I try to pass that on. I hold little meetings with the community, especially with the young people, and try to pass that knowledge on. And in my early days, I followed my father, and then at 12 years of age, he would, I asked him if I could go alone, and he said no. So he would hop on a sleigh this in winter time, and he would take me to Kanguq, that's 60 miles away. So I take him there, take him back, and he goes, okay, take me to Kanguq. So I take him to Kanguq, that's 60 miles. And I take him back without any assistance from my father. I was 12 years old, and you don't see that today. So at 12 years old, I was able to travel around without equipment. I went from point A to point B, just traditional knowledge, navigation, and understanding the weather patterns. And you don't see that anymore today. A person without equipment would get lost. They don't have the knowledge, the skill that, we possess from our parents and ancestors. So things such as that are disappearing. And another thing that's really in danger in this area is the language. My language is disappearing. Not so bad in the East. When I go to the East, like Inuit and those communities, you hear children on the street still possess that language. That's all they speak is their native language. But here, it's disappearing. So that's really sad to see that. I speak all the time in my own language, and a lot of people understand, So that's something that I'm concerned about, is our language is going to disappear.
Unless people like Ipeelie in your filmmaking, you share that in your writing and in your production.
Yeah, that's one of the main focus. Like I want to focus on showing the history of Inuit, the even modern life. Like in the next, maybe in 20 years, it's going to be our lives now. It's going to be different in 20 years. So it's doing that kind of stuff is going to be important for the future generation, and like for myself and for my family, just so they can see what life was today, looking at the future. And yeah, I think it's like like I said before, I grew up grew up with elders, and all they spoke was Inuktitut, and I still speak Inuktitut. For like I can understand it, I can write, and I can speak it, and that like my son, we're trying to keep up with him or teach him as much as we can, but it's a little bit harder nowadays because there's TV is on all the time with English, and they play games with English all the time, and like I try to speak to him as much as I can. He understands a lot. He can say a lot of things, but it's not like how we were back in the day. I'm only 30 years old, and between the 30 when I was younger to today is like there's already a lot of change from the culture, the language, and like I think that's the reason why I like to make films, because I want people to see our culture. I want them to see our language and keep it strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And these changes do happen so quickly, but what gets me excited is I get to host all kinds of scientists from all over the world. And more, I see that our science, Western science, is starting to recognize traditional knowledge and to work some of that traditional knowledge into Western science, which I think is really exciting. And I'd love to see stuff like that happening.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we sign off for today, I want to share a few things with those who are joining us. If you would like to follow along and learn more about the incredible work that Hilde and Sunniva are doing, you can visit heartsintheice.com. And there's a section there for citizen science if you want to check out some of the projects that they've been working on. If you visit our YouTube channel, the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants YouTube channel, there is a whole playlist there of past events that we have done with Hilde and Sunniva from different places around the world. Of course, from Bumsaboo over the 2 years that they were in Svalbard. Lots of really cool guests, from David Suzuki to Jane Goodall joining us as well, and some really cool science. I want to give a huge shout out to our classrooms in Alberta, in Ontario, in Pennsylvania, in Mexico for joining us live today. In fact, let's get a big wave from our group in Mexico there. There they are. So awesome to have you joining us today, and enjoy that heat. Oh, there's one of our classes in Alberta. Putting their camera back on. They are awesome. So great to have you joining us today. And then George and Ipeelie, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing some of your experiences, sharing some stories with us. And I hope we can host you again with students in the future as Hilde and Sunniva continue their work in the Canadian Arctic, and maybe even right in the Cambridge Bay area. It would be absolutely incredible to collect some more of your stories and bring more classrooms to visit you.
Mm-hmm.
How do we say thank you in
Quanakoti. Quanakoti.
Quanakotit?
Quanakote.
Is that right? Quanakotit. That's thank you.
All right. Let's if the teachers are close to the microphones, do you want to try and turn those mics on? Do you guys want to try and say thank you?
I tried. No. I got it.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hilde, Sunniva, thank you so much. I hope the weather clears up so you can travel. But it sounds to me like maybe staying an extra day or two might not be so bad. It sounds like a great community.
We're with
good
family.
hands.
We're with family. So we're good.
Amazing. All right. Well,
Thank
have a great weekend, everybody. And we can't wait to catch up again. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you all.
everybody.
Thank you.
All